Mercedes just destroyed the field in Canada with a dominant 1-2 finish, and now Formula One is in complete panic mode. Because only hours after George Russell and Kimi Antonelli locked out the front row, reports inside the paddock started pointing towards something explosive. The FIA reportedly found new evidence connected to Mercedes' radical upgrade package. And suddenly, the biggest story in Formula One is no longer the 1-2 itself. It is whether Mercedes unlocked a hidden advantage the rest of the grid completely missed. That is what makes this terrifying for rival teams. The FIA had already cracked down on the engine system many believed was behind Mercedes' straight-line dominance. The expectation was simple. Slow the car down, and Mercedes falls back immediately. Instead, they arrived in Montreal and looked faster than ever. George Russell on pole. Kimi Antonelli beside him. More than 3/10 clear of the next team. Max Verstappen only 7th. Ferrari nowhere close. But the truly shocking part was not the lap times. It was how the Mercedes behaved. The car looked unbelievably stable through brutal braking zones. Calm over aggressive curbs. Smooth through traction zones where rival cars looked nervous and unpredictable. Russell and Antonelli attacked the walls with a level of confidence nobody else on the grid seemed capable of matching. And that is exactly why tension exploded inside the paddock. Because rival engineers immediately started focusing on the redesigned gearbox, the lighter rear end, the aerodynamic changes around the floor and diffuser, and one detail that may have changed everything underneath the car. Now the entire Formula One world is asking the same terrifying question. Did Mercedes secretly build an even bigger advantage while everyone was distracted by the FIA crackdown? The first signs of tension appeared before sprint qualifying had even finished. And almost nobody watching the broadcast noticed them. Because while fans were celebrating the Mercedes 1-2, rival engineers were staring at something far more important. How the Mercedes was generating that level of performance. That is what immediately changed the atmosphere inside the paddock. Not just the lap times. The behavior of the car itself. Canada is one of the hardest circuits on the calendar to hide weaknesses. Long straights. Massive braking zones. Aggressive curb strikes. Walls waiting for even the smallest mistake. A nervous car gets exposed instantly here. But the Mercedes looked almost too perfect. George Russell attacked the final chicane aggressively without visible instability. Kimi Antonelli launched out of slow corners with unbelievable traction. Through braking zones, the rear stayed planted while rival cars constantly twitched and corrected underneath their drivers. And this is exactly why rival teams started becoming uncomfortable. Because only days earlier, the FIA crackdown was supposed to hurt Mercedes badly. Many people inside Formula One believed the silver cars had been relying heavily on a controversial engine-related advantage for their straight-line speed. The expectation was obvious. Remove the advantage, and the pace disappears. But Canada completely destroyed that theory. Instead of looking weaker, Mercedes suddenly looked more complete than ever. That is not normal after an FIA intervention. Usually, when a team loses a major technical advantage, instability appears somewhere else immediately. The car becomes inconsistent. Drivers lose confidence. Engineers scramble to recover balance. Mercedes showed none of those signs. And according to the source report, they arrived in Montreal with their biggest upgrade package of the season. Not a small tweak. A massive step forward across multiple areas of the car at the same time. The biggest change was the redesigned gearbox. Smaller, lighter, more compact internally. Now, to casual viewers, a gearbox may sound like a simple mechanical component. But inside Formula One, packaging changes like this can transform the entire behavior of the rear of the car. Think about carrying a heavy backpack while trying to sprint through a crowded airport. If someone suddenly removes weight and redistributes the balance perfectly, every movement becomes smoother. Turning feels easier. Stopping feels easier. Accelerating feels easier. That is essentially what Mercedes may have unlocked. And Canada is the perfect track to expose those gains immediately. Every heavy braking zone rewards stability. Every traction zone rewards efficiency. Every aggressive curb rewards confidence. The Mercedes suddenly had all three. But the deeper concern inside the paddock was aerodynamic behavior. The report specifically mentions changes around the side pods and floor area designed to optimize airflow toward the diffuser. That detail immediately caught attention across the garages. Because in modern Formula One, airflow underneath the car controls almost everything. If airflow remains stable, the rear stays planted. If airflow breaks apart, the car becomes nervous instantly. And the Mercedes looked unbelievably calm through every critical section of the circuit. That is why rival engineers reportedly started paying very close attention during practice and qualifying. Not because Mercedes was fast. Because the car looked efficient everywhere at once. under braking, over curbs, during acceleration, even through direction changes where other teams looked unstable and unpredictable. And then came the detail that made the situation even more explosive. The drivers themselves did not look surprised by the pace. Russell openly admitted the upgraded car felt fantastic after qualifying. Antonelli sounded calm and confident all session long. And Toto Wolff said something rival teams immediately noticed. He said the package worked exactly as expected. Exactly as expected. That wording matters more than most people realize. Because it suggests Mercedes already knew this package could dominate before the weekend even started. And in Formula One, confidence like that immediately creates suspicion when the gains appear this large after an FIA crackdown. That is why the atmosphere around Mercedes started changing so quickly on Friday in Montreal. This was no longer just a fast sprint weekend. Now rival teams wanted to know whether Mercedes had quietly unlocked another hidden advantage while everyone else was still focused on the previous FIA intervention. Then sprint qualifying finally began. And that is when the tension inside Formula One exploded completely. Because this was supposed to be the session where Mercedes finally showed weakness after the FIA crackdown. Instead, they looked untouchable. George Russell took sprint pole with a 1 minute 12.965. Kimi Antonelli locked out the front row just 0.068 behind him. But the truly shocking number was the gap behind them. Lando Norris, the closest non-Mercedes driver, was more than 3/10 slower. Ferrari was over 4/10 back. Max Verstappen could only manage 7th place. In modern Formula One, that kind of advantage immediately creates suspicion. Not because dominance itself is illegal. Because teams understand how difficult it is to suddenly gain this much pace in such a tightly packed field. And this is where the atmosphere reportedly changed completely inside the paddock. Rival engineers stopped focusing only on lap times. Now they were studying details. How the Mercedes behaved over curbs. How stable it looked under braking. How efficiently it accelerated out of slow corners despite the FIA intervention that was expected to hurt them badly. And the more laps they watched, the more uncomfortable the situation became. Because the Mercedes looked almost too complete. Usually, even dominant cars still reveal weaknesses somewhere. Maybe the rear becomes nervous under braking. Maybe the tires overheat. Maybe the car struggles over curbs. Maybe drivers constantly fight instability through fast direction changes. The Mercedes showed almost none of those problems in Montreal. That is what immediately fueled speculation across the garages. And this is where the redesigned gearbox became the center of attention. According to the report, Mercedes introduced a smaller and lighter gearbox with internal modifications designed to improve overall efficiency and power transfer. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a normal upgrade. But inside Formula One, packaging changes like this can completely transform airflow behavior around the rear of the car. Imagine shrinking a large backpack while running through a crowded hallway. Suddenly movement becomes smoother because there is more space around you. That is basically what happens with airflow inside a Formula One car. A smaller gearbox can free up critical aerodynamic space underneath and around the rear bodywork. And if airflow becomes cleaner, the diffuser works more efficiently. That creates rear stability. And rear stability creates confidence. That is exactly what rival teams appeared to notice immediately in Canada. Russell attacked braking zones aggressively without hesitation. Antonelli looked calm over aggressive curbs where other cars bounced violently. The Mercedes rear end stayed planted while rivals constantly corrected slides underneath them. And once engineers started connecting those dots, the tension inside the paddock intensified very quickly. Because the report also confirms aerodynamic changes around the side pods and floor specifically designed to optimize airflow toward the diffuser. That combination suddenly became impossible to ignore. Smaller gearbox, improved airflow structures, better rear stability, stronger traction, cleaner acceleration zones. And all of it appearing immediately after an FIA crackdown targeting another Mercedes advantage. That timing alone triggered massive suspicion. Because Formula One history is full of moments where one restriction accidentally pushes teams toward discovering something even more effective somewhere else. And now people inside the paddock are starting to fear Mercedes may have done exactly that. But the most unsettling part for rival teams was not the technology itself. It was Mercedes' reaction to the performance. Russell openly said the upgraded car felt fantastic after qualifying. Antonelli sounded completely calm despite narrowly missing pole. And Toto Wolff delivered the statement that immediately increased suspicion across the grid. He said the Montreal package worked exactly as expected. Not unexpectedly well. Not surprisingly fast. Exactly as expected. That wording matters enormously inside Formula One. because it suggests Mercedes already knew this package could dominate before arriving in Canada. And now the biggest fear inside the paddock is becoming impossible to ignore. What if the FIA crackdown never touched the real source of Mercedes' performance at all, and the new evidence being discussed behind the scenes is finally exposing something much bigger underneath this car? And this is where the entire situation becomes genuinely dangerous for Formula One. Because once rival teams believe a competitor has discovered a hidden performance window, the pressure inside the paddock changes instantly. Now every camera angle matters. Every slow-motion replay matters. Every onboard shot becomes evidence. Teams stop focusing only on improving themselves. Now they start hunting for answers inside the leading car. And after Mercedes dominated sprint qualifying in Montreal, the silver car suddenly became the center of that investigation storm. Not simply because Russell and Antonelli locked out the front row. Because of how effortless the performance looked. That detail terrified rival engineers more than the lap times themselves. The Mercedes did not appear nervous anywhere around the circuit. Russell attacked the walls aggressively like he trusted the rear completely. Antonelli looked unbelievably calm through direction changes. Even over the aggressive Montreal curbs, the car stayed stable while rivals constantly fought bouncing and instability underneath them. And in Formula One, a calm car usually means one very dangerous thing. The drivers still have performance left to extract. Think about watching two fighters in a championship bout. One looks exhausted, surviving every exchange. The other looks relaxed while controlling the entire fight. The second fighter is the one that scares everyone. That was Mercedes in Canada. And this is exactly why the FIA attention reportedly intensified after the Sprint 1-2. Because rival teams began focusing on how all the upgraded systems on the Mercedes were interacting together. Not one isolated component. The entire package. According to the report, Mercedes changed several critical areas simultaneously. A lighter gearbox. Reduced chassis weight. Aerodynamic changes around the side pods and floor. Refined MGUK deployment for acceleration zones. Individually, each upgrade sounds reasonable. Together, they may have created something much more powerful than expected. Because in modern Formula One, performance gains multiply when systems work together correctly. The lighter gearbox changes rear packaging. That changes airflow pathways. Improved airflow stabilizes the diffuser. A more stable diffuser improves rear grip. Better rear grip allows later braking and cleaner traction. And cleaner traction allows the MGUK deployment to become even more effective out of corners. One gain amplifies the next one. That is how dominant Formula One cars are born. Not through one magical trick. Through interconnected systems all suddenly operating in harmony. And that possibility is exactly what has rival teams so nervous right now. Because if Mercedes truly unlocked a complete platform breakthrough in Canada, then the FIA may not simply be dealing with one controversial detail anymore. They may be looking at the beginning of an entirely new competitive advantage cycle. That is why the rumors around new evidence became so explosive inside the paddock after qualifying. Not because anyone publicly proved illegality, but because rival engineers reportedly started noticing patterns in how the Mercedes behaved under very specific conditions. Heavy braking, corner rotation, rear stability over curbs, acceleration consistency. The car looked efficient everywhere at once. And Formula One engineers know that level of balance almost never appears accidentally. Especially not immediately after an FIA crackdown that was expected to hurt performance. That contradiction is what created so much tension behind the scenes. Because now rival teams are asking themselves a terrifying question. What if the FIA intervention accidentally distracted everybody from a much bigger technical breakthrough Mercedes had already prepared in secret? And the timing could not be worse for the rest of the grid. Antonelli arrived in Canada leading the championship after 3 consecutive victories. Russell responded instantly with sprint pole position. The drivers are pushing each other harder every weekend. Toto Wolff sounds calm and confident. And now Mercedes suddenly looks fast in every type of corner instead of only specific situations. That combination changes the entire championship picture. Because rival teams can survive one fast weekend from Mercedes. What terrifies them is the possibility that Canada was only the first glimpse of what this package can really do once the team fully understands it. And if the FIA investigation continues while Mercedes keeps winning at the same time, the political tension inside Formula One could become just as intense as the championship battle itself.